Hi and welcome to my 21.2 Ergogenic AIDS video. And today we'll be looking at a brief introduction to what ergogenic aids are, also some key organizations involved, the different types, and also 5 different examples. To begin with, I'm just going to define what ergogenics aids is. These aids are anything that could help the performer to increase performance mentally or physically to give them an edge over another competitor performance-wise. And these things can be very slight to very long, to very big differences as well. Of course, they can be abused quite a lot depending on what they are. But I'll go through the different types and some examples later on in the video. But to begin with, why would athletes use these performance enhancements? Of course, as I just said, performance enhancement is the reason. Like, they will want to always have an edge over their opponent to win, whether it be for status, intrinsic reasons, just to help them mentally as well. There's many different reasons and different ways that a performer can do it, and especially when you're on an elite level, you'll do anything you can to make sure you're the best or have an edge over the next opponent. They can be used by elite athletes and amateur athletes. Of course, the availability of them is what will probably separate whether it's available to amateurs or not. But amateurs can buy some ergogenic aids just in a corner shop, which could be caffeine. So ergogenic aids can be used by different people, but different ones tend to be used by other like elite performers because they're more available to that tier of athletes. There has been a lot of controversy in the past in a lot of big competitions like the Olympics, and this, of course, if they are abused or used the wrong way, sometimes they don't have enough research behind them. They can be very harmful to the body, or could be seen as cheating, and some ergogenic aids are banned from professional sports and are illegal, as a matter of fact, just generally as well. There have been some cases where athletes have been disqualified due to whether it be doping or using particular ergogenic aids that would be unfair in the sporting world or could be harmful to them. An example of this is the famous the German swimming team in the 1976 Montreal Games, where they looked a lot like men, and they also had deeper voices, and that was because they were doping, and they were banned because, of course, whatever the drug was doing to them was making them stronger and faster unnaturally, which would not be allowed in that type of games. There have also been a lot of other examples of athletes who dope. For example, the famous cyclist Lance Armstrong, and he won the Tour de France 7 times between 1999 and 2005, and has been recently involved in a massive doping scandal. Now, to prevent this doping, there are many key organizations that some of them work together to make it an anti-doping free, doping-free world when it comes to sports. And some of these include WADA, IOC, UK Sport, and then some national governing bodies. The first one I'm going to look at is WADA, and that stands for World Anti-Doping Association. And their main aim is to bring consistency to policies, also regulations in sporting organizations, so that can help to raise awareness about equality between competitors. And in fact, they're so big on equality that their logo itself, you can't really see it that well, but it's actually an equal sign, standing for equality between competitors. And they also created something called the code. It's called the World Anti-Doping Code. That has a list of policies and prohibited substances in the professional sporting world in most sports. Now, another organization that does deal with anti-doping would be IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee. And they are an independent international organization that are looking to build a better world through sport. And this could be done by just things such as promoting sportsmanship, just anti-doping, and they have created rules themselves to be followed by all competitors in every competition that they run. And of course, as you can see the logo there, that would be in the Olympics, so they would set the rules for the doping. They would also take into consideration WADA's doping code, as it would have a lot of valuable points and substances that they may not have thought of. So they do work with WADA sometimes. The third one I'm going to look at is UK Sport, and they deal with the investment into sport in the nations, in England's high performance athletes, for both the Olympic and Paralympic sports. That organization themselves does deal with doping, but the part that does deal with doping is called UKAD, which stands for United Kingdom Anti-Doping, and it deals with the anti-doping in the UK athletes. And they do UKAD do the testing, random testing on their athletes, and they also comply with the code, the World Anti-Doping Code that WADA created, and that ensures that all the sports bodies in the UK comply with the anti-doping code, and they also do make sure their athletes are not doping or guide them by running educational programs, and also lead testing across 40 different Olympic sports partnerships with WADA. So they actively try to prevent, especially the UK, from being involved in any doping scandals. Now, there's a number of national government bodies that are involved, but I'll just focus today on British athletics. They do no-notice testing on all their athletes to ensure they're not taking any substances that would be illegal. And they have a committee called UKA, which is committed to promoting and making sure that athletics is drug-free. And they do personal athlete education so that the athletes do know what they can and cannot do, and to cooperate with anti-doping authorities such as WADA and IOC and UK Sport. Now I'm going to look at the different types of ergogenic aids, and there are 5 different types: pharmaceutical, physiological, mechanical, nutritional, and psychological. And the first one I'm going to look at is pharmaceutical, which is any drug or substance that can be performance enhancing by injections or taking pills or just ingesting it. So like for an example of that, quite a well-known one would be steroids. As we saw in slide 1, we can clearly see that this guy is stacking it up on the steroids. That would be considered pharmaceutical. And they could come in both liquid form and in pill form. Physiological ergogenic aids can be used to enhance performance by preparing the body for the competition, to make it more prepared than it would normally be. So an example of this could be blood doping, and that would improve your aerobic capacity by adding more blood into the body, which would increase hemoglobin levels. And other examples could be EPO, oxygen, and sports massage as well. For an example like sports massage, that's just making sure the muscles are all ready and rested for the performance, and that could help to keep them more elasticated and pliable when performing. Another ergogenic aid, type of ergogenic aid, is mechanical, and these are usually external and tend to be designed to give athletes an edge over their competition, but this is normally used in training. It can be used in performance because of the clothing. Clothing is one. But other examples are heart rate monitors, weights, parachutes when running, and these put the body in a different kind of environment when they train, so that when they do run in a normal environment, they are able to adapt to any situation. The fourth one I'll look at is psychological, and these are techniques that can be used to ensure that the mind is focused and ready to perform well. For example, imagery. Athletes can use imagery to imagine themselves being very successful in sport, and it is proven that it could help certain people, depending on the athlete, to actually perform better because they've seen themselves doing what they have to do, or seeing what they'd have to do in a certain situation. And the last one I'm going to look at is nutritional, and nutrition is to do with the way the athlete eats and what they put into their body. So it could be to do with a very popular one at the moment would be creatine or protein. They'd implement that into their diet. It could just be using certain protein or carbohydrate loading. That could be one as well. It's the way you eat, or even like caffeine, where you're taking it in as part of your diet, which could be good and bad for the body depending on what you're taking. Now I'm going to take a look at each individual. I'm going to look at 5 different examples. So the first one I'm going to look at is altitude training. And altitude training, to begin with, is where the athlete has to train in high altitude conditions so that their bodies are forced to adapt. This is legal, so this is allowed in all sports. Some athletes that can afford it will live abroad in places where oxygen levels are a lot lower, so the body learns to adapt to that situation, and they go into a lower altitude climate to compete. They find it easier because the body has been living in different conditions. It also can be available for people with a cheaper option as well, so it doesn't have to be you actually have to move country. There are masks, and there are also altitude chambers that people use as well. So the mask, they control how much oxygen is being breathed in, as you can see in the picture down bottom. And then the chambers are a little bit less available than the mask because they have to be in proper labs. But the athletes do use these, especially the elite ones. And also I was just going to add in famous athletes such as Mo Farah live in other countries, train there, so that when he comes back and competes with Great Britain, his body is ready and adapted to it. So mainly this is used for aerobic players or runners or athletes, because they have to use oxygen during it. So for a heptathlete such as Ennis Hill, she may use aerobic altitude training, because she's a heptathlete, so she has to do events such as the 800, which would be considered aerobic. Caffeine is my second one, and it is the most, probably I would say on my list of examples, probably the most easy to be accessed out of all of them, and quite used, not even as an ergogenic aid, but just for some people's everyday life. Caffeine is a substance that can be found in energy drinks such as Red Bull or Monster, or even just your daily cup of coffee. And different athletes use it to give them a sense of alertness or enhance their performance. And this could be causing them to focus more. Even something simple like that could help them